The courtroom fell into stunned silence as 7-year-old Mia Chen approached Judge Hawthorne's bench, her small hand tugging insistently at the judge's black robes. For a moment, everyone thought the child was simply being disruptive, until they saw the earnest determination in her dark eyes and heard the words that would change everything about the murder trial of Marcus Blackwood. "Your Honor," Mia whispered, but her voice carried clearly in the hushed courtroom. "Thor smells the bad man's hiding place. I know because I saw him put something there. It was an impossible statement from an impossible source. How could a 7-year-old girl know anything about evidence in a murder case? How could she possibly have information that months of professional investigation had failed to uncover? And what did she mean about the police dog, Thor, smelling something that no human could detect? But as Judge Hawthorne looked down at Mia's frightened but determined face, she realized that this child was speaking with the kind of absolute conviction that could only come from witnessing something real and terrible. Behind them, Marcus Blackwood had gone pale as death, his confident demeanor cracking like a mask that could no longer hide the desperate fear beneath. Thor, meanwhile, was straining toward the old bookshelf with every fiber of his being, his professional instincts screaming that evidence was hidden somewhere very close, evidence that could prove a killer's guilt and bring justice to a family that had been searching for answers since Eleanor Whitmore's brutal murder 3 months earlier. The question was, would anyone believe that the key to solving this case lay in the partnership between a curious child and a police dog whose nose never lied? The morning sun cast long golden shadows through the tall windows of the Millbrook County Courthouse, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the ancient air. Built in 1923, the grand building stood as a monument to justice, its towering marble columns reaching toward the heavens like the arms of blind justice herself. Each step on the worn wooden floors produced a gentle creak, a whispered reminder of the countless souls who had walked these halls seeking truth, redemption, or simply answers to life's most difficult questions. The courthouse held secrets in every corner, stories embedded in its very walls like fossils in stone. Oil paintings of stern-faced judges from decades past lined the corridors, their painted eyes seeming to follow visitors with the weight of accumulated wisdom. The brass fixtures, polished to a warm glow by generations of janitors, reflected the hopes and fears of everyone who entered. High ceilings with intricate molding spoke of an era when buildings were constructed to last centuries, when craftsmanship was an art form passed down from father to son. In the main courtroom, where the most important cases were heard, 7-year-old Mia Chen sat cross-legged, her favorite spot, a worn wooden chair in the back corner that had been carefully positioned by the bailiff just for her. Her silky black hair was pulled into 2 neat pigtails tied with bright yellow ribbons that matched her favorite sundress. Behind wire-rimmed glasses, her dark eyes sparkled with an intelligence that seemed far beyond her years, taking in every detail of the courtroom like a tiny detective absorbing clues. Mia's mother, Sarah Chen, sat at her stenographer's station with the focused concentration of a concert pianist. Her fingers flew across the keys of her machine with practiced precision, capturing every word spoken in the sacred space where justice was served. Sarah had been the courthouse stenographer for 8 years, and in that time she had become as much a part of the building's character as the marble columns themselves. When other arrangements for childcare fell through, she brought Mia to work, knowing her daughter would sit quietly and color while absorbing the rhythms of the legal world. "Good morning, Mrs. Chen," came a warm, familiar voice from the courtroom entrance. "And good morning to you too, Miss Mia." Officer Jake Martinez entered the courtroom with his characteristic confident stride, his police uniform pressed to perfection, and his badge catching the morning light. But it wasn't Officer Martinez who made Mia's face light up with pure joy. It was his four-legged partner who walked beside him with the bearing of a canine prince. Thor was magnificent in every sense of the word. The German shepherd stood tall and proud, his thick coat a rich blend of black and tan that gleamed with health and careful grooming. His intelligent amber eyes surveyed the courtroom with the focused attention of a professional who took his job seriously. Every muscle in his powerful frame spoke of strength held in careful control, of power guided by discipline and training. A special harness marked him as a working dog, but it was his bearing, alert, dignified, protective, that truly announced his status as one of the finest canine officers in the state. "Hi, Officer Martinez." "Hi, Thor," Mia whispered excitedly, careful to keep her voice low in the reverent space of the courtroom. Her coloring book lay forgotten in her lap as she watched Thor take his position near the witness stand, every movement precise and purposeful. Over the months of accompanying her mother to work, Mia had become an unofficial expert on Thor's behavior. She had learned to read the subtle language of his ears, how they perked up when he detected something interesting, how they flattened slightly when he was concentrating, how they swiveled like tiny satellite dishes when he was gathering information from his environment. She had observed his protective stance, the way he positioned his body to have the best. She surveyed her domain. She had seen every type of case imaginable, from petty theft to capital murder, and had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when a trial would proceed smoothly and when it would be fraught with surprises. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hawthorne," called the bailiff, and the courtroom came to attention like soldiers recognizing their commanding officer. "Please be seated," Judge Hawthorne said in her clear, authoritative voice. "We are here today in the matter of the state versus Marcus Blackwood. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed with your opening statement." All eyes turned to the defendant's table, where Marcus Blackwood sat beside his defense attorney, like a man trying to disappear into his chair. In his mid-40s, with thinning brown hair and nervous, darting eyes, he appeared to be fighting a constant battle between the desire to proclaim his innocence and the fear of drawing too much attention to himself. His hands trembled slightly as he fidgeted with a pen, and a thin sheen of perspiration covered his forehead, despite the courtroom's comfortable temperature. The prosecutor, District Attorney Catherine Wells, rose with the confident bearing of someone who had built her career on meticulous preparation and unwavering dedication to justice. Her red hair was pulled back professionally, and her navy blue suit conveyed both competence and compassion, qualities that had made her beloved by victims' families and respected even by defense attorneys who found themselves on the opposite side of her cases. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the courtroom. "We are here today because of a senseless act of violence that took the life of Eleanor Whitmore, a beloved member of our community and the owner of Whitmore Antiques, a shop that had been a downtown fixture for over 30 years. Mia looked up from her coloring book, her young mind automatically absorbing the serious tone of the proceedings. She had heard many cases during her afternoons in the courthouse, but something about this one felt different, more intense, more charged with emotion. Eleanor Whitmore was found dead in her shop on the evening of March 15th, the prosecutor continued, the victim of what appeared to be a robbery gone terribly wrong. Valuable antiques were stolen, her cash register was emptied, and Eleanor herself was found behind the counter, struck down by a blunt object in what can only be described as a brutal and senseless attack. Thor, from his position near the witness stand, remained motionless except for his ears, which swiveled slightly as he processed the sounds and scents of the crowded courtroom. His amber eyes scanned the room with professional efficiency, cataloging each person present and monitoring for any signs of potential threat or unusual behavior. The prosecutor walked toward the jury box, her movements deliberate and commanding. she shared with pride whenever anyone asked about his partner. In their 5 years together, Thor had successfully located missing evidence in dozens of cases, had helped apprehend dangerous criminals, and had never once given a false alert. His nose was so finely tuned that he could detect traces of substances weeks after they had been present in a location. More than that, Thor seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was wrong, when the normal order of things had been disturbed. The courtroom itself seemed to respond to their presence, as if recognizing the arrival of guardians who would ensure that justice could proceed safely. The morning light streaming through the tall windows created an almost cathedral-like atmosphere, lending gravity to the proceedings that would soon begin. Every wooden bench, every piece of brass hardware, every inch of the judge's elevated platform seemed to whisper of the thousands of cases that had been heard within these walls. Stories of triumph and tragedy, of guilt and innocence, of justice served and mercy granted. Mia returned to her coloring book, but her eyes frequently drifted to Thor, watching as he settled into his professional routine. She had come to understand that Thor wasn't just a dog who happened to work with police. He was a dedicated officer in his own right, with responsibilities and instincts that made him an irreplaceable part of the justice system. In her young mind, Thor represented everything that was noble and good about the grown-up world, a protector who used his gifts to help people and keep everyone safe. The atmosphere in the courthouse was always charged with a particular kind of energy, the weight of decisions that would change lives, of testimonies that would reveal truth or perpetuate lies, of evidence that would either convict the guilty or free the innocent. But today, as Mia settled in with her crayons and Thor took his position of watchful alertness, there was something else in the air, a sense that this particular day would be different, that the old courthouse was about to reveal secrets that had been hidden in its shadows for far too long. The courtroom filled gradually as the morning progressed, each participant in the drama taking their designated place in the theater of justice. Lawyers arranged their papers with the careful precision of chess players, preparing for battle, while spectators filed into the gallery benches, their hushed conversations creating a low murmur that seemed to vibrate through the ancient wooden floors. Judge Patricia Hawthorne entered from her chambers precisely at 9 o'clock, her black robes flowing behind her like the wings of a great bird of justice. For 20 years, she had presided over this courtroom with a reputation for fairness, tempered by an unwillingness to tolerate nonsense from either side of the bar. Defendant Marcus Blackwood was identified leaving the vicinity of Whitmore Antiques at approximately the time of Eleanor's murder. His fingerprints were found on items in the shop, and when arrested he was found in possession of several valuable pieces that belonged to the victim. Marcus Blackwood shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his nervous energy seeming to radiate outward like heat from a furnace. He whispered urgently to his defense attorney, a distinguished-looking man named Robert Carruthers, who had the kind of silver-haired gravitas that came from 30 years of defending clients in courtrooms just like this one. However, the prosecutor continued, despite extensive searching by our police department's finest investigators, one crucial piece of evidence has never been recovered: the murder weapon itself. Eleanor Whitmore collected Civil War memorabilia, and among her most prized possessions was an authentic cavalry hammer from 1863. This hammer, with its distinctive brass handle and commemorative engraving, was seen in the shop just hours before Eleanor's death. It has never been found. It was at this moment that Thor's behavior began to change in subtle ways that only a trained observer might notice. His nose twitched almost imperceptibly, and his head turned slightly toward the old wooden bookshelf that stood behind the witness stand, a massive piece of furniture that had been in the courtroom since the building's construction, filled with leather-bound legal volumes that had grown musty with age. Officer Martinez, focused on the prosecutor's opening statement, didn't notice his partner's reaction, but Mia did. From her corner position, she had an unobstructed view of Thor, and she had spent enough time observing him to recognize when something had caught his attention. Her crayon paused over her coloring book as she watched the magnificent German shepherd with growing interest. Defense attorney Carruthers rose when the prosecutor finished, his movements smooth and confident. He was a lawyer who had built his reputation on finding reasonable doubt in the prosecution's case, on identifying the gaps and inconsistencies that could set his clients free. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice warm and persuasive, "the prosecution would have you believe that Marcus Blackwood is a cold-blooded killer. But I submit to you that they have built their case on a foundation of circumstantial evidence and speculation. Yes, my client was in the area that evening. He has never denied that. Yes, his fingerprints were found in the shop. But Marcus Blackwood had been a customer of Eleanor Whitmore's for several years. He was a collector himself, specializing in, slightly for emphasis, the prosecution cannot produce the murder weapon. They cannot show you the instrument that allegedly took Eleanor Whitmore's life, because it simply doesn't exist in the way they claim. My client has never set foot in this courthouse before today, has never been involved in any violent crime, and maintains his complete innocence in this tragic matter." It was at the mention of never having been in the courthouse that Thor's reaction intensified. His ears flattened slightly, and a low, almost inaudible whine escaped his throat. Officer Martinez glanced down at his partner with mild concern, assuming the dog was reacting to the stress of the crowded courtroom, or perhaps picking up on the tension that always accompanied serious criminal trials. But Mia saw something different in Thor's behavior. She had learned to read the signs that indicated when the police dog had detected something significant, and those signs were unmistakable now. Thor's body language spoke of recognition, of detection, of professional alarm. His amber eyes were no longer scanning the general courtroom, but were focused with laser intensity on the defendant's table, and more specifically on Marcus Blackwood himself. As the morning progressed and the prosecution began calling its first witnesses, Thor's agitation became increasingly apparent to anyone who knew how to read the subtle language of a highly trained police dog. What had started as a slight twitch of his nose and the momentary focus on the bookshelf had evolved into something much more pronounced and concerning. The German shepherd began to pace, not the random restlessness of a bored animal, but the controlled, purposeful movement of a professional who had detected something that demanded investigation. His powerful muscles rippled beneath his coat as he moved back and forth in the small area designated for him, his amber eyes never leaving the vicinity of the witness stand and the ancient bookshelf that stood behind it like a silent sentinel. Officer Martinez noticed his partner's behavior with growing concern. In their 5 years of working together, he had learned to distinguish between Thor's various states of alertness. There was the casual watchfulness of routine patrol, the heightened awareness of potential threat, and the focused intensity of detection, when Thor's exceptional senses picked up evidence that human perception couldn't detect. What he was witnessing now fell into that last category, but Martinez couldn't understand why. "Easy, boy," he whispered softly, reaching down to place a gentle hand on Thor's neck. The dog's muscles were tense beneath his touch, coiled like springs ready to release. "What's got you so worked up?" But Thor would not be calmed. A low whine escaped his throat. Not the whimper of distress, but the controlled vocalization of a working dog trying to communicate something vital to his human partner. His nose worked overtime, processing scents and information that no human could perceive. His entire being focused on something that the rest of the courtroom remained oblivious to. From her corner, Mia watched this interaction with the kind of focused attention that only a child can bring to something that truly captures their interest. She had seen Thor work before, had observed his professional demeanor during routine courthouse security sweeps, but this was different. This was Thor trying to tell the grown-ups something important, and they weren't listening. The first witness, Detective Raymond Cooper, took the stand to testify about the crime scene investigation. He was a veteran investigator with 25 years of experience, and his testimony was methodical and thorough. He described arriving at Whitmore Antiques to find Eleanor's body, detailed the evidence collection process, and explained how the investigation had led to Marcus Blackwood's arrest. The shop showed clear signs of forced entry, Detective Cooper testified, consulting his notes. The back door had been pried open, and the interior showed evidence of a struggle. Several valuable items were missing, including a set of Depression-era carnival glass and a collection of vintage jewelry. As the detective spoke, Marcus Blackwood's nervous energy seemed to intensify. He fidgeted constantly in his chair, his hands never still, his eyes darting around the courtroom like those of a trapped animal looking for escape routes. His defense attorney occasionally leaned over to whisper reassurances, but nothing seemed to calm the defendant's obvious distress. It was during Detective Cooper's testimony that Thor's behavior escalated to a level that could no longer be ignored. The dog began to strain against his position, his body language becoming increasingly agitated as he focused intently on the defendant's table. A low growl started deep in his chest, not threatening, but communicative, the sound of a professional trying desperately to alert his human colleagues to something they were missing. "Thor, heel," Officer Martinez commanded quietly, but with authority. The dog responded to the command by returning to his designated position, but his compliance was reluctant, his entire body radiating tension and the need to investigate whatever he had detected. Judge Hawthorne glanced over at the disturbance, her experienced eye taking in the situation with the kind of quick assessment that came from 2 decades of managing courtroom proceedings. She made a mental note but chose not to interrupt the testimony unless the disruption became more significant. Mia, however, was completely absorbed in watching Thor's attempts to communicate. She had learned to trust the German Shepherd's instincts implicitly during their many encounters in the courthouse. When Thor was alert to something, there was always a reason. When he showed signs of detection, evidence was always found. And right now, Thor was showing every sign of a dog who had detected something critically important. The prosecution continued with their case, presenting evidence, photographs, witness testimonies, and expert analysis. But Marcus Blackwood's demeanor grew increasingly desperate as the morning wore on. When his defense attorney rose to cross-examine Detective Cooper, the defendant leaned forward in his chair, hanging on every word as if his life depended on the outcome. "Detective Cooper," Attorney Carruthers began, "you mentioned that several items were missing from the shop. Did your investigation determine exactly when these thefts occurred?" "Based on the evidence, we believe the break-in occurred between 8 and 9 p.m. on March 15th, the detective replied. "And my client's whereabouts during this time?" According to his statement, he claimed to be at his sister's house in Riverside, approximately 40 miles away. It was at this moment that Thor's reaction reached a crescendo. As Marcus Blackwood's alibi was discussed, the dog's agitation became unmistakable. He began pacing again, his whines becoming more audible, his focus laser-sharp on the defendant. Officer Martinez found himself in the uncomfortable position of trying to control his partner without understanding why the animal was so disturbed. But Mia understood. With the clarity that sometimes comes to children who observe without the filters of adult skepticism, she saw what the grown-ups were missing. Thor wasn't just reacting to general courtroom stress or random sense. He was reacting specifically to Marcus Blackwood, and his reaction was growing stronger every time the defendant spoke or moved. When Marcus finally took the stand to testify in his own defense, his nervous energy seemed to fill the entire courtroom. He gripped the witness stand with white-knuckled hands, his voice shaking as he denied any involvement in Eleanor Whitmore's murder. "I was at my sister's house that entire evening," he insisted, his eyes darting around the courtroom but never settling on any one person for more than a second. "I've never even been in this courthouse before today. I'm just a simple antique collector who got caught up in something terrible through no fault of my own." It was this declaration, this specific claim of never having been in the courthouse before, that triggered Thor's most dramatic reaction yet. The dog's head snapped up as if he'd been struck by lightning, his ears flattened against his head, and a growl that was deeper and more insistent than before rumbled in his chest. His amber eyes locked onto Marcus Blackwood with an intensity that spoke of recognition, of certainty, of professional detection. Officer Martinez was now thoroughly concerned about his partner's behavior, but protocol demanded that he not interrupt court proceedings unless there was an immediate threat. He tried once more to calm Thor, but that Thor was trying to tell them something crucial. With the wisdom that sometimes comes from innocence, uncontaminated by adult doubt, she leaned over to her mother and whispered urgently,
"Mommy, Thor knows something bad about that man."
Sarah Chen glanced at her daughter with surprise, then looked over at the clearly agitated police dog. Her stenographer's training had taught her to observe and record details, and what she saw in Thor's behavior was unmistakably significant. As Marcus continued his testimony, claiming complete innocence and maintaining that he had never set foot in the courthouse before this trial, Thor's reaction intensified even further. The dog began to whine continuously now, a sound that carried across the courtroom and began to distract other observers from the proceedings. Judge Hawthorne finally called for a brief recess, recognizing that the disruption needed to be addressed before the trial could continue effectively. As court personnel and spectators filed out of the courtroom, the tension that had been building throughout the morning seemed to crystallize into something almost tangible. But Mia remained in her seat, her young mind working furiously to process what she had observed. Thor's reaction to Marcus Blackwood wasn't random or stress-related. It was specific, purposeful, and increasingly urgent. The police dog was trying to tell them something about the defendant, something that could be critically important to the case. As the courtroom emptied around her, Mia stared thoughtfully at the old wooden bookshelf behind the witness stand, the same bookshelf that had first caught Thor's attention. In her 7-year-old mind, pieces of a puzzle were beginning to come together, forming a picture that the adults around her were too distracted to see. Something was very wrong with Marcus Blackwood's story, and Thor knew it. The question was, would anyone listen to what a police dog was trying so desperately to tell them? The courthouse took on an entirely different personality after the sun went down, and the last of the day's legal proceedings had concluded. What had been a bustling center of activity during daylight hours transformed into something far more mysterious and enchanting, at least in the eyes of 7-year-old Mia Chen, who found herself spending yet another evening in the ancient building, while her mother worked late on a particularly complex case. The hallways that had echoed with the purposeful footsteps of lawyers, witnesses, and court personnel now stretched before Mia like empty corridors in a grand castle from one of her favorite fairy tales. The overhead lights had been dimmed to save energy, creating pockets of shadow and golden illumination that made even familiar spaces seem new and full of possibilities. Her small sneakers made soft squeaking sounds against the polished marble floors as she wandered through the building, her mother's gentle reminder to stay close and don't touch anything important, already forgotten in the excitement of exploration. The portraits of long-dead judges that lined the main corridor fascinated Mia more than anything else in the building. During busy court days, she barely had time to glance at them. But now she could study each painting in detail, imagining the stories behind those stern, dignified faces. Judge Clarence Worthington, who had served from 1924 to 1951, had kind eyes that seemed to twinkle even in the formal portrait. Judge Margaret Sterling, the first woman to preside over the courthouse in the 1960s, had a determined expression that reminded Mia of her own mother when she was concentrating on something important. She ran her small fingers along the carved wooden railings that bordered the grand staircase, feeling the intricate patterns that some long-ago craftsman had lovingly created. The wood was smooth from decades of hands sliding along its surface, polished to a warm glow that seemed to capture and reflect the building's history. Each carved flourish and decorative element told a story of an era when buildings were constructed to be beautiful as well as functional, when every detail mattered and nothing was too small to deserve artistic attention. The courthouse, after hours, felt like a museum come to life, filled with treasures waiting to be discovered by someone curious enough to look for them. Maya's imagination transformed the empty spaces into settings for grand adventures. The judges' chambers became a royal throne room. The jury box became a ship's deck where brave sailors made important decisions. And the witness stand became a tower where princesses waited to be rescued. It was during one of these imaginative wanderings that Mia found herself back in the main courtroom where her mother worked, drawn by the familiar comfort of the space where she spent so many afternoons. The room looked different in the evening light filtering through the tall windows, more mysterious, more alive with possibilities. The wooden bookshelf behind the witness stand, which she had seen countless times during regular court sessions, seemed somehow more imposing in the dim lighting. Curiosity drew her toward the massive piece of furniture like a magnet. The shelf was easily twice as tall as she was, filled with leather-bound legal volumes that looked ancient and important. Some of the books had titles embossed in gold lettering that had faded with age, while others bore the marks of decades of handling by lawyers and judges seeking precedents and wisdom from past cases. As Mia examined the bookshelf more closely, her sharp eyes noticed something that had escaped the attention of every adult who had passed by it thousands of times. One section of the wooden paneling didn't quite align with the rest. The grain of the wood seemed to flow differently in that area, and when she pressed her small hand against it, she could feel the slightest give in the material. At first she assumed it was simply old wood that had warped with age and the building settling over nearly a century of existence. Old buildings had lots of quirks like that. Her grandmother's house had doors that didn't close properly and floors that creaked in interesting patterns. But something about this particular irregularity nagged at her curious mind, demanding further investigation. Standing on her tiptoes, Mia pressed more firmly against the suspicious panel, feeling it yield slightly under the pressure. Her heart began to race with excitement as she realized this might be something more interesting than simple warped wood. With the determination that only a curious child can muster, she began to push and prod at different areas of the panel, testing its boundaries and searching for whatever secret it might be hiding. When the panel suddenly gave way with a soft click, Mia's gasp of surprise echoed through the empty courtroom like a whispered secret. A section of the bookshelf swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow opening that disappeared into darkness beyond. The musty smell of old air and forgotten spaces wafted out, carrying with it the promise of mysteries that had been hidden for decades. For a moment, Mia simply stared at the opening in wonder, her young mind struggling to process what she had discovered. This was like something straight out of her favorite Nancy Drew books, a real secret passage in a real building, not just the product of an author's imagination. Her heart pounded with excitement as she realized she had found something that probably no one else in the entire courthouse knew about. The passage behind the panel was narrow, but definitely large enough for a child to navigate. The walls appeared to be constructed of old brick, and the air that flowed from the opening carried the faint scent of decades-old secrets, dust and moisture, and the peculiar smell that old buildings develop in their hidden spaces. Mia could see that the passage extended deeper into the building, disappearing around a corner where her eyes couldn't follow. With the fearless curiosity that is the birthright of every child, Mia squeezed through the opening and began to explore. The passage was indeed constructed of brick, with rough mortar joints that spoke of construction techniques from a bygone era. Her footsteps echoed strangely in the narrow space as she made her way forward, using the flashlight app on her mother's phone to illuminate the way ahead. The passage curved and twisted through what must have been the interior walls of the courthouse, following a path that seemed to have been designed for secrecy and concealment. After several minutes of careful exploration, Mia found herself in a larger chamber that took her breath away with its unexpected grandeur. She had discovered what was clear.
One wall, their surfaces covered with dust but still bearing the stamps of breweries that had operated nearly a century ago. Glass bottles of various shapes and sizes were arranged on makeshift shelves, some still containing mysterious liquids that caught the light from her phone's flashlight app. Most exciting of all were the faded posters that decorated the walls, advertisements for entertainment and refreshments that had been illegal during the 1920s and early 1930s. Jazz night every Saturday proclaimed one poster, featuring the silhouette of a trumpet player. The best gin in 3 counties boasted another, with artwork that depicted elegantly dressed people enjoying themselves in defiance of federal law. Mia's excitement was overwhelming as she realized the historical significance of her discovery. This wasn't just a secret passage. It was a perfectly preserved piece of American history, a time capsule from an era when people went to great lengths to enjoy entertainment that the government had declared illegal. She took dozens of photos with her mother's phone, documenting every detail of the remarkable find, so she could share it later. As she explored further, Mia discovered that the passage system was even more extensive than she had initially realized. Multiple tunnels branched off from the main speakeasy chamber, suggesting a network that probably connected to other buildings in the downtown area. The engineering involved in creating such an elaborate system spoke of careful planning and considerable expense. Someone had invested serious resources in creating this hidden world beneath the streets of their small city. The innocent joy of discovery filled Mia's heart as she continued her exploration, her young mind already spinning tales of the adventures that must have taken place in these hidden chambers decades ago. She imagined elegant people in 1920s clothing, dancing to jazz music, sharing illegal drinks, and defying the authorities with style and sophistication. Mia had returned to explore the secret passage 3 more times since her initial discovery,
each visit revealing new wonders and mysteries within the hidden network of tunnels beneath the courthouse. She had become an expert navigator of the narrow corridors, learning which turns led to dead ends and which opened into larger chambers, filled with fascinating artifacts from the Prohibition era. The passage had become her special secret, a magical world that existed parallel to the serious, grown-up world of the courthouse above. On this particular evening, her mother was working late once again on the same complex case that seemed to require endless hours of transcription and documentation. Mia had finished her homework and colored 3 complete pages in her activity book before the lure of the secret passage became irresistible. The courthouse was quiet and near routine for her secret explorations. First, she would wait until her mother was deeply absorbed in her work, fingers flying over the stenographer's keys with the focused concentration that meant she wouldn't be disturbed for at least an hour. Then Mia would slip quietly from her chair, tiptoe to the bookshelf, and activate the hidden mechanism that opened her gateway to adventure. Tonight felt different from the beginning. As soon as Mia squeezed through the opening behind the bookshelf, she sensed something that made her small body tense with an instinct she couldn't quite name. The air in the passage seemed to carry sounds that hadn't been there during her previous visits, faint echoes that suggested she wasn't alone in the hidden tunnels. At first, she told herself it was probably just the building settling, or perhaps small animals that had found their way into the passage system. Old buildings made all sorts of mysterious noises, especially at night when the daytime activities had ceased, and the structure could expand and contract with temperature changes. But as she moved deeper into the tunnel, the sounds became more distinct and undeniably human. Footsteps, definitely footsteps, and they were coming from somewhere ahead of her in the passage system. Mia's heart began to race with a fear unlike anything she had experienced during her previous adventures. The passage that had felt like her own private kingdom suddenly seemed threatening and dangerous. Someone else knew about the secret tunnels, and that someone was down here right now, in what she had considered her special discovery. Her young mind immediately jumped to the most frightening possibilities. What if it was a burglar using the passages to break into the courthouse? What if it was someone dangerous who would hurt her if they discovered she had found their hiding place? The fairy tale magic of the hidden world evaporated instantly, replaced by very real and very adult fears. Moving as quietly as she could manage, Mia crept forward until she could see light ahead. Not the steady glow of electric illumination, but the flickering beam of a flashlight being carried by someone moving through the tunnels with purpose. She pressed herself against the rough brick wall and tried to control her breathing, which seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. During her previous explorations, Mia had discovered a small alcove carved into the wall of the main tunnel, probably used decades ago for storage or as a hiding place for contraband liquor. She had thought it was a charming architectural detail, but now it became her salvation. Squeezing into the narrow space, she made herself as small as possible and peered through a crack in the old brickwork that gave her a view of the larger chamber ahead. What she saw there would haunt her dreams for months to come. A man she didn't recognize was standing in the center of the speakeasy chamber, and everything about his posture radiated nervous energy and barely controlled panic. He was of medium build, probably in his 40s, with thinning hair that was damp with perspiration despite the cool temperature in the underground space. His clothes were wrinkled and disheveled, as if he had been engaged in strenuous activity, and his hands shook as he carried something wrapped in what appeared to be an old cloth. "Perfect," he muttered to himself, his voice carrying clearly in the enclosed space. "No one will ever think to look here. No one even knows this place exists." Mia watched in frightened fascination as the stranger unwrapped his mysterious bundle with trembling hands. What he revealed made her small gasp of horror, which she quickly stifled by pressing both hands over her mouth. It was a hammer, but not just any hammer. Even in the dim flashlight illumination, Mia could see that it was old and ornate, with decorative elements that suggested it was valuable or historically significant. More frightening than its apparent age and value were the dark stains that covered the metal head of the tool, stains that looked ominously like dried blood. The man was muttering continuously as he worked, his words revealing the depth of his panic and desperation. Should never have panicked, should never have taken it. But she surprised me and I couldn't think, and now it's done, and I have to hide it where no one will ever find it. Mia watched in horrified silence as the stranger moved to a section of the chamber wall where loose bricks created a natural hiding place. With frantic efficiency, he removed several bricks to create a cavity large enough to conceal the hammer, then wrapped the weapon carefully in its cloth covering before placing it in the makeshift hiding spot. "There," he whispered to himself as he carefully replaced the loose bricks, making sure the hiding place looked undisturbed. "No one knows about these tunnels. No one will ever think to look here. It's like it never existed." The man's movements became more urgent as he prepared to leave, gathering his flashlight and taking one last look around the chamber to ensure he hadn't left any evidence of his presence. Mia could see his profile clearly now in the flashlight beam, and her young mind automatically catalogued every detail with the photographic memory that would serve her so well in the weeks to come. He had a distinctive scar on his left hand, a jagged line that looked like the result of an old injury. When he was nervous or concentrating, he had the habit of touching his collar repeatedly, a gesture that seemed unconscious but distinctive. His walk was slightly uneven, favoring his right leg in a way that created a subtle but recognizable gait. Most importantly, Mia memorized his face, the weak chin, the nervous eyes, the way his mouth twisted when he was talking to himself. She studied him with the intense focus that children bring to anything that frightens or detail into her memory, without consciously intending to do so. As the stranger prepared to leave the chamber, Mia realized with growing terror that he would be coming back through the tunnel where she was hiding. Pressing herself even deeper into the small alcove, she held her breath and prayed that he wouldn't notice her presence in the shadows. The man passed within inches of her hiding place, his nervous energy filling the narrow tunnel with tension. Mia could hear his labored breathing and smell the acrid scent of fear-induced perspiration as he hurried toward whatever exit he had used to enter the passage system. She waited until the sound of his footsteps had completely faded before daring to move from her hiding place. Curiosity overcame fear as Mia crept forward to the chamber where she had witnessed the hiding of the hammer. She wanted to see exactly where the man had concealed his terrible secret, though she had no intention of disturbing the hiding place. Some instinct told her that what she had witnessed was connected to something very bad, something that grown-ups would need to know about eventually. Following the passage system to its far end, Mia discovered an exit that led to the alley behind the courthouse, a door so carefully concealed that it was nearly invisible from the outside. Through a crack in the door, she watched as the stranger emerged into the alley, looked nervously in both directions, and then hurried away into the night. The walk back through the passages to the courthouse seemed endless, every shadow potentially hiding new terrors, every sound possibly indicating the return of the frightening stranger. When Mia finally squeezed back through the bookshelf opening into the familiar safety of the courtroom, her entire body was shaking with reaction to what she had witnessed. She found her mother still absorbed in her work, completely unaware that her daughter had just witnessed something that would prove to be the key to solving a murder case months in the future. Mia wanted desperately to tell someone what she had seen, but the words seemed impossible to form. How could she explain that she had been exploring secret passages? How could she make adults understand that she had seen a man hiding what was obviously evidence of some terrible crime? Instead, she simply returned to her coloring book and tried to process what she had experienced. But sleep that night brought nightmares filled with dark tunnels, bloody hammers, and the frightened, desperate face of a man who had thought his secrets would never be discovered. The moment Marcus Blackwood entered the courtroom as the defendant in Eleanor Whitmore's murder trial, Mia Chen felt her world tilt on its axis. The face that had haunted her dreams for months was suddenly sitting just 20 feet away from her, clean-shaven and wearing a neat suit, but unmistakably the same man she had watched hide a bloody hammer in the secret passage beneath the courthouse. Her small hands gripped her coloring book so tightly that her knuckles went white, and her heart began to race with the same terror she had felt that night in the hidden tunnels. Every detail of Marcus's appearance matched her memory with perfect clarity. The weak chin, the nervous eyes that darted constantly around the room, the way his mouth twisted when he was under stress. But it was his unconscious habits that provided the final, undeniable confirmation of his identity. As the morning progressed and the pressure of the trial mounted, Marcus began displaying the same nervous gestures that Mia had observed during his panicked hiding of the murder weapon. His left hand repeatedly moved to his collar, touching and adjusting it in the exact manner she remembered from that terrifying night. When he shifted in his chair, she could see the scar on his hand, that distinctive, jagged line that had been burned into her memory, along with every other detail of his appearance. The recognition hit her like a physical blow, making her stomach clench with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was the man. She was absolutely certain. This was the person who had used her secret passage to hide evidence, who had muttered about concealing something where no one will ever look, who had emerged from the courthouse alley in the middle of the night, carrying secrets that could destroy him. But with recognition came a terrible dilemma that her 7-year-old mind struggled to process. How could she tell anyone what she knew without admitting that she had been exploring the secret passage without permission? Her mother had always taught her to be honest, but she had also been taught to follow rules and not go places where she wasn't supposed to be. The conflict between these two principles created a knot of anxiety in her chest that made it difficult to breathe. As she watched Marcus testify, claiming complete innocence and insisting he had never been in the courthouse before, Mia's internal struggle intensified. Every word he spoke was a lie. She knew because she had seen him there, had watched him hide evidence of his crime in a place he thought would never be discovered. The injustice of it made her young heart burn with indignation. Thor's increasingly agitated behavior suddenly made perfect sense to Mia's observant mind. The German shepherd wasn't reacting to general courtroom stress or random sense. He was detecting something connected to Marcus, something that his superior senses could perceive even when the evidence was hidden far beneath the courtroom floor. Dogs could smell things that humans couldn't, and Thor was clearly picking up traces of whatever Marcus had hidden in the passage months ago. The realization that she and Thor were the only ones who knew the truth created a sense of partnership between the girl and the police dog that transcended species. They were allies in knowledge, guardians of secrets that could bring justice to Eleanor Whitmore's family, and ensure that her killer didn't escape punishment for his crimes. Mia's mature reasoning, advanced beyond her years by her unique experiences and observations, began to piece together the full picture of what had happened. The hammer that Marcus had hidden, with its dark stains and obvious age, must be the missing murder weapon from Eleanor's antique shop. The Civil War-era cavalry hammer that the prosecutor had mentioned in his opening statement was hidden just feet away from where everyone was sitting, concealed in a place that Marcus thought would never be searched. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Mia's intelligent mind. Marcus had chosen the secret passage as his hiding place precisely because he believed no one knew it existed. He had counted on the fact that the hidden chamber would remain undiscovered, that his secret would stay buried forever in the forgotten tunnels beneath the courthouse. He had no way of knowing that a curious 7-year-old girl had found the passage weeks before his desperate nighttime visit, that his perfect hiding place had already been discovered by the one person who spent enough time in the courthouse to notice details that adults overlooked. As the trial continued and Marcus's confident demeanor began to crack under the pressure of testimony and cross-examination, Mia found herself studying his every gesture and expression with the intensity of a detective gathering evidence. She watched him touch his collar when the prosecutor asked difficult questions. She saw how his scar caught the courtroom light when he gestured with his left hand. She observed the subtle limp in his walk when he moved from the defendant's table to the witness stand. All the details that had been burned into her memory during that terrifying night in the passage. The weight of her knowledge was becoming unbearable. Every moment that Marcus continued to lie, every second that the trial proceeded without the crucial evidence being discovered, felt like a betrayal of Eleanor Whitmore's memory and her family's need for justice. Mia could see the victim's daughter in the gallery, a woman in her 50s who looked heartbroken and desperate for closure. She could see the prosecutor struggling to build his case without the murder weapon that would prove Marcus's guilt beyond any doubt. Her mother, Sarah, began to notice her daughter's distress as the morning wore on. Mia was fidgeting more than usual, her coloring forgotten as she stared intently at the defendant and the agitated police dog. Her small face was pale with the strain of keeping such an enormous secret, and she had been unusually quiet since the trial began. "Are you feeling all right, sweetie?" Sarah whispered during a brief recess, kneeling beside her daughter's chair with concern evident in her voice. "You look upset about something." Mia's internal struggle reached a crescendo at her mother's gentle question. The kind concern in Sarah's voice, combined with the enormous weight of what she knew, nearly broke her resolve to remain silent. For a moment she was tempted to tell her mother everything, about the secret passage, about witnessing Marcus hide the hammer, about knowing that he was lying when he claimed never to have been in the courthouse before. But fear still held her back. Fear of getting in trouble for exploring where she wasn't supposed to be. Fear that the adults wouldn't believe her story about secret passages and hidden chambers. Fear that she might somehow make things worse by speaking up. All she could manage was a whispered lie that felt like betrayal on her tongue. "I just have a tummy ache, Mommy." Sarah's maternal instincts told her that her daughter's distress was about more than a simple stomach upset. But the court was reconvening, and she had to return to her stenographer's duties. She made a mental note to talk with Mia more seriously after the trial concluded, to find out what was really troubling her normally cheerful daughter. As the afternoon session began and Marcus's alibi was examined in greater detail, Mia watched the proceedings with growing frustration and determination. The truth was sitting right there in the hidden chamber beneath their feet, waiting to be discovered. Thor knew something was wrong. His continued agitation was proof that the evidence was close by. The justice that Eleanor Whitmore deserved was within reach, but only if someone was brave enough to speak up about what they knew. The turning point came when Marcus, under intense cross-examination, repeated his claim of never having been in the courthouse before the trial. The lie was so blatant, so completely contrary to what Mia had witnessed, that her young sense of justice could no longer tolerate the deception. She had seen this man in the courthouse. She had watched him hide evidence of his crime. She knew where that evidence was located, and she knew that Thor could confirm her story. With a kind of courage that sometimes emerges from the purest motives, Mia made her decision. The fear of getting in trouble paled beside the greater fear that Eleanor Whitmore's killer might go free because she was too scared to speak up. Justice was more important than her own comfort, and the truth was more important than avoiding potential punishment for her unauthorized explorations. Leaning close to her mother during a brief pause in the proceedings, Mia whispered with urgent intensity, "Mommy, I need to tell the judge something very important about the bad man." The words were out before she could change her mind, and there was no taking them back. In that moment, Mia Chen transformed from a quiet observer of the adult world into an active participant in the pursuit of justice, ready to share her terrible secret and trust that the grown-ups would listen to what a 7-year-old girl had to say about murder and hidden evidence and the truth that lay concealed in the forgotten passages. Beneath their feet, the beam of Officer Martinez's flashlight cut through the darkness like a blade, slicing open years of shadow. Dust motes swirled in the air, thick and slow, each one disturbed for the first time in decades. The smell hit them almost immediately, stale, metallic, with a faint sourness that made Martinez's throat tighten. Beside him, Thor surged forward, nose low, tail stiff, every muscle tuned to the scent trail only he could fully read. The narrow corridor was lined with rough brick on one side and the back of the oak shelves on the other. Here and there, scraps of old paper clung to the mortar, yellowed with age. Martinez's boots scuffed against the stone floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the confined space. From the courtroom doorway, the beam of another flashlight joined his. Judge Hawthorne's voice, calm but steady, reached in after him. "Take your time, officer. I want everything documented." Thor paused abruptly, his body locking into that unmistakable point of focus. Front paws braced, chest low, nose pressed to a seam in the wall ahead. A muffled whine rumbled from deep in his chest, his amber eyes flashing toward Martinez, urging him forward. Martinez crouched, running his hand over the bricks until he felt the faint give of something recessed. With a push, the panel shifted inward, releasing another breath of stale air, sharper this time, coppery, like blood long dried. Behind him, in the courtroom, Mia stood on tiptoe, her small fingers gripping the doorframe. Her mother's hand rested protectively on her shoulder, but the girl's eyes never left Thor. She seemed to sense, even without seeing clearly, that they were close to the thing she had feared and carried in silence for so long. Martinez angled his light into the space beyond. In the halo of white, shapes emerged, an old trunk, its leather straps cracked and brittle, a canvas bag slumped in the corner, and, half hidden under a moth-eaten cloth, a length of metal that gleamed cold and certain under the beam. Thor pressed his nose to it, then sat back, issuing a short, definitive bark. Martinez's voice was steady, but carried an undertone of gravity when he called back to the courtroom. "Your Honor, we've got something, and I think it's exactly what we've been looking for." In the front row, Marcus Blackwood's head dropped into his hands, shoulders shaking, not from grief, but from the knowledge that the walls, the dog, and a child had all conspired to strip him of his lies. Judge Hawthorne stepped closer to the doorway, her silhouette framed in the courtroom light. "Secure it, photograph everything, and officer—"
The metal containers hold prey inside, in something intelligent enough to keep learning from each encounter until it finds a way to succeed. Jennifer never learned what the creature was or where it came from, but she learned something more important. There are things sharing the highways with professional drivers that do not appear in any field guide or wildlife manual. Things that have adapted to hunt in the modern world while remaining invisible to most of the people they prey upon. The thing in her headlights was real, and it was still out there, waiting for the next truck to break down or stop in the wrong place at the wrong time. Somewhere in the forest along Interstate 95, something that should not exist was learning from its encounter with Jennifer Walsh, preparing for the next time it heard the sound of diesel engines in the darkness.
District Attorney Wells's voice carried a note of excited recognition. "I think I know what we're looking at here. My grandmother used to tell stories about tunnel systems that connected downtown buildings during Prohibition. She said the courthouse was part of an underground network that allowed people to move between establishments without being seen by federal agents. That would explain the sophisticated engineering," Judge Hawthorne replied, her legal mind already processing the historical implications of their discovery. This wasn't some hastily constructed hiding place. This was part of a comprehensive system designed to support significant illegal activity. The town fathers were apparently more involved in circumventing federal law than any of us realized. Thor's behavior was becoming increasingly intense as they moved deeper into the passage. The German Shepherd's powerful nose worked overtime, processing layers of scent information that told stories no human could perceive. His body language communicated mounting excitement and professional certainty. He was definitely tracking something, and that something was getting stronger the further they progressed. The passage began to widen after approximately 30 feet, just as Mia had predicted, and the ceiling height increased enough that the adults could stand more comfortably. The change in architecture suggested they were entering a space that had been designed for occupancy rather than mere transit, and the anticipation in the group was palpable as their flashlight beams revealed the edges of a much larger chamber ahead. When they emerged into the main speakeasy chamber, the collective gasp from the adults was audible even over Thor's increasingly excited panting. The space that opened before them was like stepping into a perfectly preserved museum exhibit from the 1920s, a time capsule that had been sealed away from the world and forgotten by everyone except one curious 7-year-old girl. The chamber was roughly rectangular, perhaps 20 feet by 30 feet, with a ceiling high enough to accommodate a crowd of people engaged in illegal entertainment. Wooden barrels lined one wall, their surfaces covered with dust but still bearing the stamps and markings of breweries that had operated during Prohibition. Some still contained mysterious liquids that caught and reflected the flashlight beams like liquid amber. Glass bottles of various shapes and sizes were arranged on improvised shelving along another wall. Gin bottles, whiskey containers, wine vessels, and exotic liqueurs that spoke of sophisticated tastes and expensive illegal importation. Many still contained their original contents, creating a display that would have made any museum curator weep with joy at such perfect preservation. The most fascinating artifacts were the promotional materials that decorated the walls like windows into a vanished world. Faded posters advertised jazz night every Saturday and promised the finest entertainment this side of Chicago. Hand-painted signs offered premium spirits and dancing until dawn, while others warned patrons to keep quiet about our little secret. One poster, remarkably well preserved despite its age, showed elegant figures in 1920s attire enjoying cocktails and dancing with Art Deco styling that captured the rebellious spirit of the era. Another advertised Madame Celeste's psychic readings, alongside images of crystal balls and mystical symbols, suggesting that the speakeasy had offered entertainment that went well beyond simple alcohol consumption. District Attorney Wells was practically vibrating with excitement as she took in the historical treasure trove around them. "This is incredible," she breathed. This is like finding King Tut's tomb, but for local history. The Historical Society is going to go absolutely crazy when they learn about this. Sarah Chen, who had followed the group into the passage with maternal concern for her daughter's safety, found herself caught between amazement at the historical discovery and growing anxiety about what they were actually looking for in this hidden space. "Mia, sweetie," she called softly, "can you show us exactly where you saw the man hide whatever he was carrying?" Mia's expression grew serious as she shifted from the role of enthusiastic tour guide to that of a witness providing crucial testimony. Her small finger pointed toward a section of the chamber wall where the brick construction showed signs of disturbance. Loose mortar, slightly displaced bricks, and what appeared to be recent handling despite the overall aged appearance of the space. "He put it over there behind those loose bricks," Mia said, her voice carrying the weight of terrible memory. "He was really scared and kept talking to himself about how no one would ever look here. He wrapped it up in an old cloth, and it looked really heavy and—" her voice dropped to a whisper. "There were dark stains on it that looked like blood." The chamber fell silent except for the sound of their breathing and Thor's increasingly agitated panting. The German shepherd was now straining toward the exact section of wall that Mia had indicated, his professional instincts screaming that the evidence he had been detecting all morning was finally within reach. Officer Martinez played his flashlight beam across the indicated wall section, and even to inexpert eyes, it was clear that this area had been disturbed much more recently than the rest of the chamber. While the overall construction showed the patina of decades, this particular section looked as if it had been handled within the past few months. "Thor's going crazy," Martinez observed, his voice tight with professional anticipation. "Whatever's behind those bricks, he can smell it from here. After 8 years of working with him, I can tell you that he's never been more certain about a detection." The tension in the chamber was almost unbearable. They approached the hiding spot that Mia had identified months earlier. History was about to intersect with justice in the most unexpected way, and everyone present understood that they were moments away from discovering evidence that would either vindicate a child's extraordinary testimony or expose the most elaborate coincidence in legal history. But as Thor's excited whining echoed off the brick walls and Marcus Blackwood's muffled sobs carried down from the courtroom above, no one really doubted what they were about to find hidden in the forgotten spaces beneath their feet. Thor's reaction to proximity with a disturbed wall section was immediate and unmistakable. The German shepherd's entire body went rigid with professional alertness, every muscle coiled with the controlled tension of a detection dog who had found exactly what his training had prepared him to locate. His amber eyes fixed on the loose bricks with laser intensity, and the low whine that escaped his throat carried the unmistakable communication of success, the sound of a working dog telling his human partner that the search was over. "That's definitely an alert," Officer Martinez confirmed, his voice tight with professional excitement and personal vindication. After dismissing his partner's instincts throughout the morning, he was now witnessing the vindication of everything he had learned to trust about Thor's abilities. "He's telling us there's evidence behind those bricks, and after 8 years of partnership, I can guarantee he's not wrong." Judge Hawthorne approached the wall section with the careful deliberation of someone who understood that the next few minutes would either make legal history or expose her to professional ridicule for the rest of her career. The loose bricks that Mia had identified were clearly visible now that they knew what to look for. Several had been recently removed and replaced, and the mortar around them was noticeably fresher than the surrounding construction. "Officer Martinez," Judge Hawthorne instructed, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority, "I want you to document everything before we disturb anything. Photographs, measurements, detailed observations. I want a complete record of exactly what we find and how we find it." Martinez produced his department-issued camera and began the meticulous process of evidence documentation that would be crucial for any subsequent legal proceedings. Each loose brick was photographed from multiple angles, the overall wall section was documented, and Thor's alert behavior was captured on camera as proof of the professional detection that had led them to this moment. The process of removing the loose bricks was painstakingly careful, with each piece of masonry being lifted out individually and set aside in a way that preserved the integrity of the hiding place. As the cavity behind the wall began to open up, the musty scent of long-concealed secrets grew stronger, and Thor's excitement reached a crescendo of barely controlled professional enthusiasm. When Martinez's flashlight beam penetrated the hidden cavity, illuminating what lay within, the collective intake of breath from everyone present was audible even over the sound of their racing hearts. Wrapped in what appeared to be an old cloth, exactly as Mia had described, was the unmistakable shape of a hammer, its distinctive silhouette confirming their wildest hopes and Marcus Blackwood's worst fears.
"There it is,"
Mia said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and remembered fear.
"That's what the bad man hid. I told you Thor smelled it."
Martinez photographed the wrapped object in situ before carefully lifting it from its hiding place, the weight of the item confirming that it was substantial enough to be a weapon. When he carefully unwrapped the cloth covering, revealing the contents to the assembled group, the silence in the chamber was broken only by District Attorney Wells's sharp exclamation of triumph. The hammer that lay revealed in Martinez's hands was exactly what the prosecution had been searching for throughout their investigation. It was clearly antique, with the distinctive brass handle and commemorative engraving that matched descriptions of Eleanor Whitmore's Civil War-era cavalry hammer. More importantly, despite months of concealment in the hidden cavity, the dark stains on the metal head were still visible, stains that would undoubtedly prove to be Eleanor's blood when subjected to forensic analysis.
"My God,"
Wells breathed, her prosecutorial instincts recognizing the significance of what they had discovered.
"this is it. This is the missing murder weapon. We've got him."
The formal evidence collection process began immediately, with Martinez calling for forensic teams and evidence photographers, while maintaining the chain of custody that would be crucial for courtroom presentation. But even as the professional machinery of criminal investigation ground into motion, everyone present understood that the case against Marcus Blackwood had just shifted from circumstantial to overwhelming. Above them in the courtroom, the sound of muffled sobbing indicated that Marcus had finally grasped the full implications of what was happening beneath his feet. The confident defendant, who had entered the courthouse that morning, claiming complete innocence, was now faced with the undeniable reality that his most carefully guarded secret had been exposed by a 7-year-old girl and a police dog whose instincts had never failed. When they finally emerged from the passage to confront Marcus with their discovery, his reaction was immediate and complete. The last vestiges of his composed denial crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane, and the words that poured from him carried the weight of months of accumulated guilt and terror. "I never meant for it to happen," Marcus sobbed, his voice breaking with the strain of carrying such a terrible secret for so long. It was supposed to be a simple robbery. Eleanor wasn't supposed to be there that late. When she surprised me, I panicked, and the hammer was just sitting there on the counter, and I grabbed it without thinking, and then she was on the floor, and there was blood, and I couldn't take it back. His confession continued in broken fragments, each revelation adding another layer to the prosecution's case. He had known about the secret passage from stories his grandfather had told him. His grandfather had worked as a janitor in the courthouse during Prohibition and had been part of the network that maintained the hidden speakeasy system. When Marcus found himself with a murder weapon and a desperate need to hide evidence, the forgotten passage had seemed like the perfect solution. "I thought no one would ever find it," he continued, his voice hollow with the realization of how completely his plan had failed. "Grandpa said those tunnels had been sealed up and forgotten for decades. How could I know that some little girl would find them? How could I know that a police dog would be able to smell blood through brick walls?" The irony of his situation was not lost on anyone present. Marcus had chosen what he believed was the most secure hiding place possible, a secret chamber that had remained hidden for nearly a century, known only through family stories about illegal activities from a bygone era. His grandfather's knowledge of Prohibition-era secrets had seemed like the key to the perfect crime, allowing him to conceal evidence in a place that no investigation would ever discover. But he had not counted on the innocent curiosity of a child whose explorations had already mapped every inch of the hidden passage system. He had not anticipated that the same qualities that made the secret chamber perfect for hiding evidence, its age, its concealment, its isolation, would also preserve scent traces that a trained detection dog could identify months after the evidence was hidden. District Attorney Wells could barely contain her professional satisfaction as she watched the final pieces of her case fall into place. The murder weapon was recovered. The defendant had confessed, and the testimony of both Mia and Thor would provide unshakable proof of how the evidence had been located. Marcus Blackwood's fate was sealed by his own words and actions, and Eleanor Whitmore's family would finally have the justice they deserved. "I want everything documented," Wells instructed the forensic team that was now processing the evidence. "Photographs, blood analysis, fingerprint examination, everything. This needs to be bulletproof for trial." But even as the professional machinery of justice processed the physical evidence, everyone present buried forever. The formal evidence collection process that followed the discovery of Eleanor Whitmore's murder weapon was conducted with the meticulous attention to detail that would ensure the case against Marcus Blackwood was legally unassailable. Forensic photographers documented every aspect of the hidden chamber, creating a permanent record of the Prohibition-era speakeasy that had inadvertently become the key to solving a modern murder case. Each artifact in the chamber was catalogued and photographed, not only as potential evidence but as pieces of local history that would eventually find their way into museum collections. The bottles, posters, and barrels that had witnessed illegal entertainment in the 1920s had now become silent witnesses to 21st century justice, their preservation in the sealed chamber, making them invaluable both historically and legally. The murder weapon itself was subjected to the full range of forensic analysis, with technicians carefully collecting samples of the dark stains that covered the hammer's metal head. Despite months of concealment in the hidden cavity, the blood evidence remained detectable and would provide DNA confirmation of Eleanor Whitmore's murder when compared to samples from the victim. The distinctive brass handle and commemorative Civil War engraving matched perfectly with photographs from Eleanor's antique shop inventory, removing any possibility that this could be a different weapon, planted by someone seeking to frame Marcus. Marcus Blackwood's complete confession, recorded by court stenographer Sarah Chen with the same professional precision she brought to all legal proceedings, provided a detailed account of the crime that resolved every question the prosecution had been unable to answer. His admission that he had known about the secret passage through family connections not only explained how he had been able to hide the evidence so effectively, but also definitively contradicted his repeated sworn testimony that he had never been in the courthouse before his trial. "I need this on the record," District Attorney Wells announced, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a prosecutor who had just seen months of investigative work vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. "Mr. Blackwood, you are admitting under oath that you murdered Eleanor Whitmore with the hammer. We have just recovered from the hidden chamber that you stole valuable antiques from her shop, and that you deliberately concealed evidence in a location you knew from family stories about Prohibition-era activities." "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice barely audible but clearly recorded by the court reporter. "I killed Eleanor Whitmore. I stole from her shop. I hid the hammer in the secret passage because I thought no one would ever find it there. I lied about never being in the courthouse. I lied about everything that had seemed destined to end in frustration and reasonable doubt." Judge Hawthorne, who had presided over hundreds of criminal cases during her 20-year career, found herself moved by the profound demonstration of how truth could emerge from the most unexpected sources. "In 2 decades on this bench," Judge Hawthorne said, her voice carrying a note of wonder that judicial decorum couldn't quite suppress, "I have never witnessed anything quite like what we've experienced today. A 7-year-old child and a police dog have together accomplished what months of professional investigation could not. They have located the key evidence in a murder case and brought a killer to justice." Eleanor Whitmore's daughter, who had been present in the courtroom throughout the trial, wept openly as she finally received the closure that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. For months, she had lived with the terrible uncertainty of knowing that her mother's killer might escape justice due to lack of evidence. Now, thanks to the unexpected partnership between Mia and Thor, she could finally begin the process of healing and moving forward with her life. "I can't believe it," she said through her tears to District Attorney Wells. "All this time, the evidence was right here in the courthouse, and it took a little girl to find it. My mother would have loved this story. She always said that truth has a way of coming out, even when we least expect it." Defense attorney Carruthers, who had entered the courthouse that morning confident in his client's chances of acquittal, now faced the ethical resolution of representing someone who was undeniably guilty of the crimes charged. His professional obligation to provide zealous representation had been fulfilled, but Marcus's confession and the overwhelming physical evidence removed any possibility of mounting a successful defense. "Your Honor," Carruthers said with the dignity of a lawyer who understood that justice had been served, even though his client would face severe consequences. "In light of my client's confession and the recovered evidence, I would like to discuss the possibility of a plea agreement that acknowledges his cooperation and remorse, while ensuring that he faces appropriate consequences for his actions." Sarah Chen, who had been documenting the most extraordinary day in her career as a court stenographer, found herself struggling with complex emotions as she watched her daughter at the center of such momentous events. Pride in Mia's courage and intelligence warred with concern about the psychological impact of being so closely involved with a murder case and the media attention that would inevitably follow. "Mia was so brave," Sarah whispered to Officer Martinez as they watched the forensic team continue their work. "I'm proud of her, but I'm also worried about how all this attention might affect her. She's just 7 years old, and suddenly she's the most famous child in the state." Martinez, whose own professional reputation had been enhanced by Thor's successful evidence detection, understood Sarah's concerns. "Your daughter has a gift for observation and the courage to speak up for justice," he replied. "Those are qualities that will serve her well throughout her life. As for Thor and me, we owe her a debt of gratitude for teaching us to trust instincts, even when we don't fully understand them. Thor himself seemed to understand that his professional duties had been successfully completed. The German Shepherd's demeanor had returned to the calm, controlled alertness that characterized his normal working state. But there was an unmistakable satisfaction in his bearing as he sat beside Officer Martinez, having proven once again that his training and instincts were worthy of complete trust. The courthouse staff, many of whom had worked in the building for decades without suspecting the existence of the hidden chamber, were still processing the implications of the morning's discoveries. Bailiffs, clerks, and administrators, who had passed by the bookshelf thousands of times, found themselves looking at their familiar workplace with new eyes, wondering what other secrets might be hidden within its century-old walls. Judge Hawthorne, as she prepared to formally conclude the most unusual court session of her career, found herself reflecting on the broader implications of what they had witnessed. The convergence of a curious child's exploration, a police dog's professional instincts, and a killer's desperate attempt to hide evidence had created a perfect storm of justice that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. As the group finally emerged from the secret passage into the natural light of the courthouse's main floor, they carried with them not only the physical evidence that would convict Eleanor Whitmore's killer, but also a renewed appreciation for the unexpected ways that truth and justice could emerge from the shadows. The old courthouse, which had hidden its Prohibition-era secrets for nearly a century, had finally revealed them in service of modern justice, proving that some buildings truly do have souls that remember and, when the time is right, help set things right. The morning that had begun with a routine murder trial had transformed into something far more significant. A demonstration of how courage, curiosity, and professional dedication could combine to ensure that truth would always find a way to surface, no matter how carefully someone might try to bury it in the hidden places of the world. What began as a routine murder trial transformed overnight into the most talked-about case in county history. By noon, crowds gathered on the courthouse steps. Reporters, cameras, and stunned citizens flocked to witness the aftermath of what was already being dubbed the Secret Passage Case. Channel 7's veteran crime reporter Janet Morrison had covered thousands of trials, but never one like this. How that a murder case was cracked open by a 7-year-old girl and a police dog in a forgotten Prohibition-era speakeasy, Morrison asked her cameraman, still in disbelief. Inside the courthouse, young Mia Chen sat in Judge Hawthorne's chambers for her first interview. Her voice, small but steady, carried the weight of truth. She told the story with remarkable composure, how she'd found a hidden door while waiting for her mother after work, how the dark chamber reminded her of a treasure cave, and how she'd seen the bad man hiding something inside. But the turning point, she said, came from watching Thor. Thor's nose tells him things we can't see, she explained. When he gets excited, it's always for a reason. I had to help him tell the grown-ups. Thor, the German Shepherd canine officer, quickly became a regional icon. Television crews captured his noble posture and amber eyes as he demonstrated the precise, urgent behavior that had led him to the hidden evidence, straining toward the bookshelf, tail wagging in professional satisfaction. The moment he alerted on the wall, captured on video, played across news broadcasts for weeks. Officer Martinez was candid on camera. I've worked with Thor for 8 years. I should have trusted him sooner. Mia understood him before I did. That day, she reminded me what true partnership means. Mia's mother, Sarah Chen, found herself balancing between protecting her daughter and feeling immense pride. Mia notices things others don't, she explained. She's always had a strong sense of right and wrong. I want to help her stay grounded while honoring her courage. Judge Hawthorne delivered a statement that echoed across the legal community. Justice can come from the most unexpected places. Miss Mia Chen and Canine Officer Thor reminded us that heroes come in all sizes, including 7-year-old girls and 4-legged officers. Courthouse staff were equally stunned. Bailiff Robert Thompson, who had passed the bookshelf daily for 15 years, could only shake his head. That little girl found something I never knew was there. Makes you wonder what other stories this place holds. Legal scholars praised the judge's decision to take Mia's testimony seriously. Professor Elizabeth Hartman called it a model of judicial flexibility in the pursuit of truth. The community response was overwhelming. Flowers, cards, and gifts flooded the courthouse. Children sent in drawings of Mia and Thor. Local businesses hung banners for "Our Hometown Heroes." The city council announced an upcoming ceremony. Calls came from the state capitol, asking for more details about the remarkable duo. That evening, in the quiet of their small apartment, Sarah tucked Mia into bed. The yellow sundress she wore during the trial hung from a chair, and the television clips had faded into memory. Now came the deeper questions. "Mommy, the woman who cried in court."
"Daughter?" Mia asked. Sarah nodded gently. "Yes, she was, and you helped her find peace." Mia looked thoughtful. "Because we found the hammer, and the bad man told the truth, so now she doesn't have to worry anymore." Their conversation touched on fear, morality, and why people make terrible choices. Sarah explained that sometimes fear and desperation lead people astray, but that choosing to do the right thing always matters. "How did I know to trust Thor?" Mia asked. "You pay attention," Sarah said softly. "That's your gift." Within a week, Officer Martinez and Thor visited Mia at home. What began as a quiet social call soon turned into a neighborhood gathering. Children met the heroic dog, and Mia, with beaming pride, explained his training to her friends. Martinez, watching the interaction, reflected on what he had learned. "She understood Thor better than I did that day. Her trust reminded me why I became a handler in the first place." The ripple effect spread quickly. Elementary students across the district asked more questions about police dogs and civic duty. Mia's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed a sudden rise in curiosity and purpose among her class. They see that even kids can make a real difference. Mia handled her fame with quiet humility. When classmates asked her how she solved a murder, she always gave the same answer: "I couldn't have done it without Thor." Their bond grew stronger, not just detective and canine, but two beings bound by trust and purpose. The school soon invited Martinez and Thor to visit Lincoln Elementary. The gymnasium buzzed with excited children awaiting the dog they'd seen on television. Martinez began the demonstration with obedience drills, then invited Mia to join him for the scent detection portion. "Mia taught me something important," he told the students. "To trust Thor completely, even when I don't understand him." She saw what I missed. When one student asked how kids could help police dogs, Mia answered without hesitation: "You have to watch carefully. Thor's ears and body move differently when he finds something. If you really pay attention, you'll understand." The session became more than a demonstration. It was a lesson in courage, listening, and civic responsibility. By the time students returned to their classrooms, many were inspired to help their communities, no matter how small they were. The day concluded with a private courthouse tour arranged by Judge Hawthorne. For the third-grade class, it was a moment of living history. Seeing the secret bookshelf, the courtroom,
and the people who had brought justice to light. At the end of the tour, Sarah quietly thanked. Remember that sometimes the wisest voices come from the smallest people. Later that afternoon, in the courthouse garden, Mia and Thor found a quiet moment together. Sitting on a bench beneath the oak tree, Mia scratched Thor's ears and reflected on everything that had changed. "We did something big," she whispered. Thor, tail gently thumping, lay beside her. He didn't need words to understand. Together, they had proven a simple, powerful truth, that heroes can come in any form, and that justice sometimes depends on those who are simply willing to listen. On a crisp autumn morning, Dr. Margaret Thornfield climbed the courthouse steps, silver hair catching the light. As president of the Millbrook County Historical Society and a professor emeritus of American history, she had uncovered countless local legends, but never anything like this. A hidden Prohibition-era speakeasy buried beneath the courthouse was the kind of discovery that rewrites history books. Judge Hawthorne's call had reached Dr. Thornfield at her university office, and the moment she heard of the secret chamber, she knew it wasn't just a legal curiosity. It was a time capsule. When the bookshelf swung open to reveal the brick-lined corridor, her breath caught. "This wasn't a bootlegger's afterthought," she whispered. "It was built by skilled hands, meant to last." But none of this would have come to light if not for two unlikely detectives, a 7-year-old girl named Mia Chen and a German shepherd named Thor. Mia, quiet but perceptive, had found the hidden door while waiting for her mother at work. But what truly unlocked the mystery was her ability to listen to the instincts of Thor, the police dog no one else took seriously, that morning in court. Thor was excited, Mia told reporters. His ears were doing the thing they do when he finds something important. No one listened, so I had to help him speak. That intuition led to the discovery of a long-forgotten chamber filled with vintage bottles, photographs, and barrels that still held the scent of Prohibition spirits. Mia became an unlikely tour guide for the historical team, pointing out each room in turn with childlike wonder, but also unmatched familiarity. The chamber was more than preserved. It was pristine. Original fixtures, promotional flyers, and even jazz-era decor whispered of a time when the town's citizens had organized a quiet rebellion against federal law. Further investigation revealed something bigger. The speakeasy wasn't isolated. Ground-penetrating criminal act that led to this discovery was almost poetic. Marcus Blackwood, in his desperate attempt to hide a murder weapon, had inadvertently unearthed a lost chapter of local history. His actions had revealed not just the truth of a crime, but the secrets of a town's past. Thor's role wasn't overlooked. The dog who had alerted on the wall became part of the historical record. His nose uncovered evidence and a time capsule, Thornfield said, that deserves a place in both history and justice. It didn't take long for the story to outgrow Millbrook. Within days, CNN affiliates picked it up. Then came Good Morning America, NBC Nightly News, and CBS This Morning. The ingredients were irresistible. A murder mystery solved by a child and her canine partner, a hidden speakeasy, and an entire town's secret identity brought to light. Mia, in her yellow sundress and glasses, answered questions with soft confidence. Thor, regal and composed, became an instant sensation. His footage, straining at the bookshelf, tail wagging in triumph, went viral. Officer Martinez, humble and honest, admitted his mistake. I should have trusted Thor from the start. Mia understood what he was saying before I did. Judge Hawthorne used her interviews to highlight a deeper truth, that justice sometimes comes from voices we aren't conditioned to hear. In 20 years on the bench, she told NBC, I've learned that the truth doesn't always speak through adult logic. Sometimes it speaks through instinct, curiosity, and the courage of a child. Sarah Chen, Mia's mother, helped navigate the media frenzy. She ensured interviews were age-appropriate, balanced schoolwork with obligations, and fiercely protected Mia's childhood. Her care helped the nation see Mia not as a novelty, but as a hero in her own right. The educational potential was obvious. Within weeks, publishers called, literary agents pitched non-fiction series and children's books. Schools begged for visits from the now iconic duo. Officer Martinez began receiving requests from schools in neighboring states. To manage demand, a structured outreach program was launched, teaching kids about civic duty, police canines, and the courage it takes to speak up. At Lincoln Elementary, Mia's home school, the case became part of the curriculum. Mrs. Rodriguez helped create lesson plans, combining local history, justice system basics, and social-emotional learning. Mia taught them something no textbook ever could, she said, that your voice matters no matter how small you are. Mia herself spoke to students. Thor couldn't talk with words, but he was telling us, you just have to pay attention. One of the most lasting impacts came in the form of a new children's safety initiative, Speak Up, Listen. It included role-play scenarios, visual signals, and lessons from the courtroom that had changed everything. It was already being adopted by districts across the state. We're not just teaching children to speak, Sarah said. We're teaching adults to listen. Judge Hawthorne turned the courthouse into an educational tool. Tours showed students where the bookshelf stood, where Mia testified, and where history had been unearthed. A permanent display marked the sealed passage, now a symbol of how past and present could intersect in extraordinary ways. The courthouse belongs to you, Hawthorne told students during visits. It's where truth wins, no matter who speaks it. Back in the garden behind the courthouse, Mia and Thor often found a quiet moment after events. One day she scratched behind his ears, reflecting. We did something big, she said softly. Thor didn't need to answer. His tail wagged once. Together, they had done more than solve a murder or uncover buried history. They had restored trust, in justice, in childhood courage, and in partnerships that defy expectation. As the ripples continued to spread, from schools to homes to national headlines, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a story, it was a movement. A reminder that justice can come from anywhere, even a little girl and her dog. At the State Police Canine Training Academy, the crisp morning air buzzed with energy. Commands shouted, dogs barking, handlers urging focus. But one German shepherd stood out, not for his size, not for brute strength, but for the intelligence in his amber eyes and the unwavering focus he gave his partner. Thor was just under 2 years old when he arrived, hand-picked from a prestigious breeding program known for producing elite law enforcement dogs. His pedigree included legends, but bloodline alone couldn't guarantee success. What set Thor apart was more elusive, an innate intelligence and a burning desire to serve. Officer Jake Martinez, a recent transfer to the K9 unit, noticed it right away. He's not just following commands, he told the trainers. He's thinking. Sergeant Patricia Williams, head of the academy, agreed. You can't teach what Thor has. It's born into him. Thor and Martinez began their partnership not on the streets, but through endless hours of quiet work, learning each other's rhythms, communication styles, signals, and silences. Trust built slowly but deeply. Thor's training was rigorous, from basic obedience to advanced scent detection, evidence location, and crowd control. Every module tested his patience, instincts, and restraint. His nose, already exceptional, was fine-tuned to detect substances and trace evidence even seasoned dogs might miss. He learned how to find objects hidden behind drywall, under floorboards, and in crowded public spaces. Just as importantly, he learned how to alert Martinez, sometimes with a rigid tail, sometimes just a subtle shift in posture. Martinez learned to read Thor's body like a map. By the time he graduated, Thor wasn't just ready, he was exceptional. When his badge was clipped to his harness at the ceremony, Thor stood at attention, tail still, eyes steady. "We're not just graduating dogs," said Chief Robert Henderson. "We're commissioning officers." Thor's first major bust came just 3 months in. A cache of stolen firearms had been hidden in an abandoned warehouse, expertly concealed. Human searchers came up empty. Thor found them in minutes. But it was the rescue of a missing child, a 6-year-old lost in dense forest, that established Thor's legacy. Helicopters, search teams, and drones had failed. Thor followed the scent through water, rocks, and thick brush. He found her shivering in a small cave, alive. From that point forward, every case only deepened the bond. Martinez and Thor began to operate almost wordlessly. A flick of an ear, a pause in step, the tension in Thor's body, all were signals Martinez could decode with uncanny accuracy. One of the most important lessons came during a domestic violence case. The suspect had vanished. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts, and the trail seemed cold. But Thor picked up a scent trail that zigzagged through neighborhoods in a pattern that defied human logic. Martinez hesitated. Was Thor lost? But then Thor's energy shifted, ears high, nose locked, pulling toward a garage behind an abandoned house. Beneath a tarp-covered boat was the suspect, confident he'd escaped. He hadn't. "I learned then," Martinez later told recruits, "that his nose told stories logic never could." In a high school drug case, Thor repeatedly alerted to a locker that seemed empty. Administrators were eager to move on, but Thor wouldn't back down. Martinez finally ordered the locker dismantled, and behind the panel, a stash was found. A major dealer was taken down. "I almost ignored him," Martinez admitted. "That's a mistake I'll never make again." One winter, an elderly man with dementia wandered off into a snowstorm. For hours, teams searched in vain. Thor worked through deep snow and icy rain for 6 straight hours. Martinez struggled to keep up, but Thor didn't stop. Not until he found the man, alive in a covert. His paws were bleeding, but he had done his job. At home, Thor was different, playful, warm, tail thumping on the porch. He napped in sunbeams, played fetch, and begged for scratches. But one sound, a distant siren, a car door slamming, would bring him to attention in an instant. Thor was always on duty, even when resting. Within the department, Thor wasn't treated as a tool. He had a nameplate in the lobby. Officers greeted him like a colleague. His commendations were real and documented. His success rate? A staggering 99.7%. When school visits and public that the badge represents. He became a bridge between police and the public. All his training led to that moment in the courthouse, when Thor caught the scent of blood behind an old wall. No one else noticed, but Thor wouldn't stop alerting. What followed changed everything. The discovery of the murder weapon, the unraveling of a case, and the revelation of a hidden Prohibition-era speakeasy. It was a career-defining moment for Thor, for Martinez, and for the justice system that listened to a dog when no one else did. Months later, the city honored Thor. On a golden autumn morning, the courthouse square filled with people. Officers, children, reporters. Dozens of canine teams from across the state came to salute one of their own. Chief Henderson stepped to the podium. Some of our best officers don't speak, but they listen better than anyone. Thor received a custom-made medal, his profile etched in bronze, surrounded by a magnifying glass, the scales of justice, and a police badge. When Martinez placed it around his neck, Thor stood tall, as if he understood exactly what it meant. Martinez, voice trembling, addressed the crowd. "Thor's not just my partner. He's my teacher, my protector, my friend." The courthouse case was incredible, but for me, it was just another day when Thor did what he's always done: serve with everything he has. Families shared their stories. A grandmother told how Thor found her lost grandson. Schools displayed drawings of Thor with superhero capes. One read, "When I grow up, I want to be like Thor, but I'm a person, so I'll be a police officer." Thor's tail wagged at every name called. His ears perked when kids cheered. And then, one last tribute. In the garden behind the courthouse, 7-year-old Mia Chen, the girl who had trusted Thor's alerts when no one else did, threw a tennis ball across the lawn. Thor chased it joyfully, leaping through leaves as the crowd watched. He was just a dog again, for a moment. But everyone there knew the truth. He was the best kind of hero, one who listens, one who leads, one who never gives up. The courtroom that once echoed with Marcus Blackwood's confident denials was now electric with anticipation. The secret passage had changed everything. What began as a circumstantial murder trial had transformed into a clear, indisputable reckoning, driven not by technology or legal maneuvering, but by the instincts of a police dog and the courage of a 7-year-old girl. Judge Patricia Hawthorne called the court to order. Her usual poise now carried a subtle sense of satisfaction. The gallery was packed. Reporters, law students, historians, and townsfolk filled the room, all aware they were witnessing something unforgettable. The state's chief forensic analyst, Dr. Susan Patterson, delivered the final blow to doubt. The blood on the recovered else is less than 1 in several billion. She went further. The hammer's unique brass handle and Civil War-era engraving matched Whitmore's antique shop inventory. The weapon, the motive, the suspect, all now aligned. Next came Marcus Blackwood's full confession, read aloud by District Attorney Wells. It was a chilling account of poor choices spiraling into irreversible tragedy. He had broken into Whitmore Antiques, expecting an easy theft. He hadn't counted on Eleanor returning. Caught, panicked, he reached for the nearest object, the historic hammer, and struck. Then, thinking quickly, he staged a robbery, made off with valuables, and hid the weapon in a location he was certain no one would ever find: the Prohibition-era tunnel system his grandfather once described. But he hadn't counted on Mia Chen. Blackwood's grandfather had once been a courthouse janitor during the 1920s and 30s. Family tales of hidden rooms and bootlegger tunnels became bedtime folklore, and ultimately the blueprint for a cover-up. Mr. Blackwood believed hiding the weapon in a passage unknown to modern staff would ensure it was never found, said defense attorney Robert Carruthers. He could not have imagined a child would discover it by chance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A murder weapon lost in a forgotten tunnel. A crime undone by curiosity and a canine's nose. Patricia Williams, Eleanor's daughter, took the stand to remind everyone of what mattered most. "My mother loved history," she said through tears. "She would have been fascinated by the secret passage, and proud that a little girl and a dog helped bring the truth to light." Marcus Blackwood pleaded guilty. Carruthers, his defense lawyer, acknowledged the crime and expressed his client's remorse. "He's confessed, cooperated, and accepts full responsibility," Carruthers said. "He asks only for the court's fair consideration." D.A. Wells didn't let the moment pass without honoring the case's extraordinary path to justice. This case wasn't solved by luck, she told the court. It was solved by a child who paid attention, a dog who refused to be ignored, and professionals willing to listen to both. Dr. Margaret Thornfield testified last, not as a forensics expert, but as a historian. She explained the tunnel's historical significance and how this trial would forever link local justice with the forgotten architecture of the past. In her chambers, Judge Hawthorne reflected. A mandatory life sentence loomed. But this case wasn't typical. It had been cracked open by uncommon courage, and even Marcus had shown remorse. Could redemption still have a place? When sentencing resumed, the room was solemn. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge began, "you've confessed to a crime that took the life of a beloved citizen. But justice isn't just punishment, it's truth. And today,
"I'm sorry," he said quietly, facing Eleanor's family. "I didn't plan to hurt anyone, but I panicked. And I will live with what I did, every day." Patricia Williams followed. Her grief was still raw, but her words carried grace. "My mother believed in truth, and because of a brave little girl and a dedicated dog, that truth came out." Judge Hawthorne delivered it with clarity. "Marcus Blackwood, you're hereby sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Eleanor Whitmore, with eligibility for parole after 25 years. This reflects both the gravity of your crime and your full cooperation. It was just, it was final, and it brought peace." The trial ended, but its ripples continued. The courthouse itself had changed. Staff passed the once ordinary bookshelf, now sealed and marked with a brass plaque, "Secret passage discovered here." What was once a forgotten corner now drew visitors, reporters, even school field trips. Bailiff Robert Thompson found himself telling the story over and over. 15 years I walked by that wall, never thought twice. But that little girl, she saw what we missed. In her chambers, Judge Hawthorne often reflected on the decision to listen to Mia's quiet voice. "She reminded me that justice doesn't always come from the loudest sources," she said. "Sometimes it comes from where we least expect it." Officer Martinez and Thor became legends in law enforcement circles. Thor's nose had solved the case that no one else could. Their story became a case study in canine handler training programs statewide. "Thor taught me not just to follow, but to trust," Martinez told rookies. "His instincts saw through what human logic couldn't." Mia returned to coloring in the back of the courthouse, as she had before, but things had changed. Staff stopped to greet her more often. Thor became her shadow when she visited. To them, she wasn't a witness, she was family. Her antique shop reopened, run now by her daughter. A memorial inside honored Eleanor's life, her love of history, and how her death led to a historic discovery. She would have loved that part, Patricia said. She believed history reveals itself when we're ready to see it. Public trust in law enforcement grew. Children saw police not as enforcers, but protectors, especially the ones with 4 legs. Support for canine programs surged. Even more importantly, parents noticed something else. Children speaking up when things seemed wrong. Teachers reported increased engagement, curiosity, and conversations about right and wrong. Mia and Thor had set an example. This trial didn't just solve a murder. It proved that courage, curiosity, and listening, truly listening, can change everything. It reminded a town that secrets don't stay buried forever. That justice, however delayed, a dog who refused to be ignored, and a community that remembered how to believe in the truth. 3 months after Marcus Blackwood's conviction, 7-year-old Mia Chen had transformed. Her newfound confidence wasn't flashy, it was steady,
quiet and grounded in what she had endured. The girl who once hesitated now stood taller, spoke with calm assurance, and met challenges with a sense of responsibility that belied her age. The experience of uncovering a murderer in the courthouse secret passage had changed her, not by making her feel special, but by reinforcing a lesson she would carry forever. Truth matters, and voices, even small ones, can make a difference. That belief shaped how she now interacted with classmates, teachers, and strangers alike. When she witnessed older kids bullying a smaller child on the playground, she stepped in immediately, calmly describing what she saw and getting help, just as she had during the trial. "I learned that grown-ups will listen when you tell them something important," she told her mother afterward. "But you have to be brave enough to speak up first." Her mother, Sarah Chen, remained the anchor in Mia's post-trial life. She vigilantly managed her daughter's sudden fame, shielding her from media overload and ensuring Mia still had time to just be a kid, coloring, playing, and growing up without the burden of celebrity. Interviews were rare and only allowed if they educated or inspired, never for show. Thor, the police canine who had helped crack the case, remained a cherished presence in Mia's life. Their bond had deepened, evolving from fascination into something more like mutual respect and quiet love. His visits to the Chen home became neighborhood events, with Mia often leading demonstrations of his training. She could interpret his body language with uncanny precision, impressing even veteran officers. School presentations gave Mia a new purpose, teaching her peers not about solving murders, but about being observant, brave, and kind. "You don't have to catch a criminal to be a hero," she'd say. "You just have to speak up when something seems wrong." Sarah helped Mia process the emotional weight of what she had lived through. Their bedtime talks weren't about fame, but values. "You were brave," Sarah reminded her, "but the most important thing is that you're kind, honest, and always trying to do the right thing." Mia's interest in justice grew. She asked to visit police stations, learned about investigations, and peppered Officer Martinez with questions. Her thoughtful curiosity surprised many, especially coming from a 7-year-old. Yet Sarah didn't push her toward a future in law enforcement. Right now, she told reporters, her job is to be a good student and a kind. Police Academy, the new Thor protocol, taught handlers to trust the dog even when human logic disagreed. Exercises were redesigned to simulate complex conditions like the courthouse walls, training both dogs and handlers in persistence and interpretation. "Dogs don't just sniff out evidence," explained Sergeant Patricia Williams. "They solve problems. Thor didn't need to touch what he found. He found a way to tell us it was there." Thor's role expanded beyond crime scenes. His presence in schools, safety fairs, and public events was transformational. Kids who feared police now ran up to greet him. Officers reported that Mia's ongoing relationship with Thor helped children view law enforcement in a friendlier light. Martinez often said, "When kids see Mia and Thor together, they see trust. That's the bridge." Thor's instincts also continue to shine in active cases. In one missing persons case, Martinez followed Thor's lead, despite conflicting human logic, and found a lost elderly man within hours. In another, Thor detected narcotics hidden in custom furniture, cracking open a trafficking ring authorities had all but given up on. Thor's legacy was now being carefully documented. Video footage, case breakdowns, and communication analysis
were being turned into curriculum for future K-9 teams. The department had even expanded funding for dog teams, thanks to both results and overwhelming public support. Back in the community, the courthouse had become more than a government building. It was now a symbol of justice emerging from the most unexpected places: a child and a dog. Visitors came from far and wide to walk the halls where Mia and Thor had uncovered truth hidden for nearly a century. City council meetings and court proceedings were suddenly filled with residents who had never paid attention before. Judge Hawthorne's courtroom became a beacon of civic transparency and public trust. The trial's ripple effects reached into classrooms, too, especially through Sarah Chen's new Speak Up for Safety program, now taught in multiple counties. It gave children practical tools: how to notice, how to tell the difference between normal and suspicious, and how to speak to trusted adults. The Historical Society's restoration of the secret passage brought national attention. Tours of the tunnel system became popular, drawing tourists and revitalizing local businesses. The story of how a child and a dog cracked the case became part of the courthouse's official guided experience. These partnerships between schools, law enforcement, and historians transformed the community. Local schools used the case to teach history, English, and science. Kids studied forensic methods, wrote essays, and other dog teams became family staples. The first Heroes Come in All Sizes celebration brought together thousands to honor the partnership that helped solve the case. Children participated in safety activities, dog demos, and heard Mia speak once more, always humble, always focused on what others could learn from what she had experienced. The legacy of the secret passage case lived on in subtle, powerful ways. In the conversations parents had with kids, in the increased voter turnout at City Hall, in classrooms where being brave now had real-life examples, and in a courthouse whose stone walls would forever whisper the truth. Sometimes the smallest voices and the keenest noses are the ones that bring justice home. On a golden autumn morning, the courthouse square of Millbrook County filled with hundreds of visitors for the first annual Heroes Come in All Sizes celebration. It had been exactly 1 year since the discovery that transformed this quiet town into a national symbol of justice, courage, and the power of unlikely partnerships. 8-year-old Mia Chen stood at the podium on the courthouse steps. A year ago, she'd been a quiet child who colored in courtrooms. Today, she addressed a crowd with quiet confidence. "A year ago, I was just a regular kid who liked to explore," she began. "I never thought that finding a secret door would help catch a bad man, but I learned that the most important thing you can do is trust your instincts and be brave enough to tell the truth, even when you're scared." Her words carried experience far beyond her age. Since the case, Mia had grown into a poised, young advocate for civic responsibility, delivering talks across the region, inspiring children, and showing that courage wasn't about age or size. It was about doing what's right. Nearby, Thor, now 10 years old, grayer around the muzzle, but no less precise, performed a demonstration with Officer Martinez. The crowd watched as the famous police dog completed complex tasks, a living testament to the value of instinct and training. The partnership that had helped solve Eleanor Whitmore's murder was stronger than ever, and the celebration honored them both. Inside the courthouse's new museum wing, visitors explored exhibits featuring the preserved secret passage, forensic discoveries, and interactive displays about K-9 units. Dr. Margaret Thornfield led a special tour recounting both Prohibition history and the modern investigation that had made the hidden chamber national news.
A quiet corner of the courthouse square had also been transformed, the Eleanor Whitmore Memorial Garden. Filled with the flowers she loved, it served as a place of reflection. Her daughter Patricia read a letter from Marcus Blackwood, now serving time in state prison. His remorseful words thanked Mia and Thor for uncovering the truth and admitted that he had lacked the courage. Came when Judge Hawthorne shared how the case changed her view of justice.
Mia reminded me that truth and wisdom can come from anywhere, she said. It was her courage and my decision to listen that brought justice.
Officer Martinez, now promoted to K-9 Unit Supervisor, used his speech to advocate for canine instinct training and community policing.
Thor taught me that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is follow your partner's lead, he said.
And Mia showed me that young people can see what adults miss. As Mia tossed a ball for Thor in the garden after the ceremony, it was clear that the partnership had grown beyond the case. Their bond was now one of mutual understanding, built on shared purpose.
In moments like these, simple, joyful, and grounded in trust, Mia and Thor's story had spread far beyond their town.
Inspired by their courage, children across the country began speaking up about wrongs in their communities. In Arizona, 9-year-old Jennifer Martinez reported suspicious activity, helping police break a burglary ring. In Oregon, 10-year-old Michael Thompson overcame his shyness to report a man acting inappropriately around school children. His tip led to an arrest. Educators in 15 states adopted the Speak Up for Safety curriculum, developed by Sarah Chen and local schools, teaching children practical tools to observe, trust their instincts, and report concerns to adults. Police departments across the U.S. updated canine training programs to reflect the lessons of Thor's courthouse success. In Seattle, Miami, Chicago, and Dallas, new training exercises taught handlers to trust their dogs, even when physical barriers challenged traditional search methods. The Thor Protocol became a national model for handler dog communication. Even the International Association of Chiefs of Police featured the case at its annual conference, showcasing it as an example of how community policing and K-9 teamwork could solve high-stakes crimes. Mia's story inspired a best-selling children's non-fiction book, The Secret Passage Mystery, which sold over 200,000 copies, written in kid-friendly language and illustrated with real images. It taught readers about truth, justice, and bravery. Royalties supported police K-9 programs nationwide. The book's success led to an educational series about service animals and civic responsibility. Sarah Chen, with guidance from educators and child psychologists, helped shape the series to empower children with real-world tools. Filmmaker David Richardson released a critically acclaimed documentary, Hidden in Plain Sight, which premiered at Sundance and was picked up for national broadcast. Combining historical context with interviews from those involved, the film highlighted the deeper themes behind the case: trust, integrity, and the policy. Professors used it to discuss child testimony, canine forensics, courtroom adaptability, and the evolution of modern civic engagement. Thor and Martinez were invited to law enforcement conferences in Canada, the UK, and Australia. Their presentations emphasized handler dog trust and the importance of listening to all voices, including those that might be overlooked. Meanwhile, Dr. Thornfield's preservation work drew interest from historical societies across the U.S. Communities began investigating their own hidden Prohibition-era structures, using the Millbrook Courthouse as a blueprint for safe, educational restoration. And through it all, Mia continued corresponding with children who had been inspired by her bravery Carefully supervised pen pal programs connected young people across the country, allowing them to share their own moments of courage and to realize they were never alone. In the sanctuary of the courthouse garden, away from the celebration and crowds, Mia and Thor sat quietly. She scratched behind his ears, and Thor rested his head in her lap. They didn't need to speak. "You helped me be brave," Mia whispered. "And I'll always remember that." Thor's gentle tail wag and bright eyes said everything back. He wasn't just a working dog anymore. He was her partner, her teacher, her friend. Their work together was done, but their impact was only beginning. Watching Mia with Thor reminds me that some friendships transcend ordinary boundaries, Sarah reflected as she observed her daughter and the police dog during one of their garden visits. They found each other at exactly the right moment, when her curiosity and his professional instincts combined to solve a mystery that might otherwise have remained hidden forever. But more than that, they found a friendship that will last the rest of their lives, based on mutual respect and shared commitment to doing what's right. As the sun began to set over the courthouse garden, casting long shadows across the peaceful space where an unlikely friendship had flourished, Mia and Thor settled into the comfortable companionship that had become their signature. The little girl who had trusted a police dog's instincts and the working dog who had found a human partner who understood his dedication to justice sat together in perfect harmony. Their friendship, a living testament to the power of courage, truth, and the bonds that can form between the most unexpected allies when circumstances call them to serve something greater than themselves. Their story had begun with a mystery hidden behind courthouse walls, but it had evolved into something far more significant, a demonstration of how individual acts of gathering twilight of the courthouse garden, surrounded by the flowers of Eleanor Whitmore's memorial and the peaceful sounds of their community settling into evening, Mia Chen and Thor remained together, forever friends whose legacy would continue to inspire courage, justice, and the belief that heroes truly do come in all sizes, with the biggest hearts often found in the smallest and most unexpected packages. Watching Mia and Thor's extraordinary journey reminds us of something profound, the unbreakable connection between humans and the dogs who choose to trust us with their hearts. German shepherds, with their unwavering loyalty and protective instincts, embody the very best of what it means to be a faithful companion. They don't just work alongside us, they become part of our families, our stories, our lives. Thor's dedication to justice and his gentle friendship with a little girl shows us that our dogs are so much more than pets. They're partners, protectors, and teachers who help us become better versions of ourselves. Every tail wag, every alert ear, every moment of quiet companionship is a gift that enriches our lives in ways we're only beginning to understand. The love between a person and their dog is one of life's purest forms of devotion. It's built on trust, nurtured through understanding, and strengthened by the countless small moments we share together. If you've been feeling that pull to deepen the bond with your own faithful companion, there's a gentle path forward that many dog lovers have found helpful. Sometimes, all it takes is learning to listen a little better to what our dogs are trying to tell us. Your dog is already trying to communicate with you. Perhaps it's time to learn their language.